last week, something we touched on was the art of non-lazy songwriting. And in a way, this is sort of yet another way to look at non-lazy songwriting. Because an intro is something that now we think of just as, oh, well, it's maybe the piano riff that's in the first verse. We get like 2 measures of it before the singer starts singing. Or maybe we take the music from the chorus and just take the vocals out, and that's the intro to our song before going into the first verse. Some songs don't even bother having an intro at all. The first thing you hear is actually the vocalist with the other instruments. That happens as well. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But having an intro that is distinct from any other part of the song, it's not just something from the chorus or taking the tag after the chorus and extrapolating it into a whole intro. It's not just taking the riff or the bass line or whatever, or the chord progression of your verse, and it's just you haven't started singing yet. But having a intro that is essentially a large song section into itself that is only done once for the intro. That's it. It's just in the intro. It's not reused anywhere else. Is another thing that is a sign of non-lazy songwriting, right? Because who wants to write an intro that you're not doubling down on something? You could just use the piano riff that you have for your first verse, or just use the music from the chorus, and that's most often what's done. But to take the time to write something that even like a lot of people don't even want anymore. A lot of people will talk about, especially if you go to channels or podcasts that are all centered around pop music and how to compete with Taylor Swift and all of that. What they'll tell you, and this isn't entirely wrong, it's just very narrow, you got to get to the chorus before 30 seconds. You know how many people say that? There's probably 10,000 people on YouTube that will tell you that it's a rule. You got to get to the chorus before 30 seconds and definitely before a minute. Sure. If you want to cater to the lowest common denominator, the type of people that don't really listen to music, they just kind of have it on in the background, or when they drive in the car, they have it on just so that they can tap their foot, or people that just think of music as background music while they work now, which is a lot of people, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But should we cater our music to those people? Probably not. Especially if you're somebody that you care about the craft of songwriting and you want to make your song good. And what you don't want is just to cater all of your music just to what you think the lowest common denominator person wants. Which, to me, should be what we all want to do. Which, again, doesn't mean every song should be 10 minutes and have a long... No, I'm not saying that it's inherently good to have an intro that's a totally separate section either. I feel like I say this ad nauseum, but there's always somebody in the comments that's always like, oh, you're saying that a song should be complex. No, I've never said that. I've literally never said that. Some songs are great to be simple, and other songs are great being complex. The idea that simple is good or complex is good is asinine. Both of those things are ridiculous. We should reject them outright. In the same way, having a long intro to your song that's totally different from the rest of your song is not inherently good or inherently bad, but it's something that may fit with certain songs. So something to consider with this is your music, your song, is taking the listener on a musical journey. I think too often we think too narrowly, like, oh, well, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and all its little derivations. I'll have a pre-chorus in this one. Oh, I won't have a bridge in this one. I'll have a post-chorus instead. We sort of we accept the premise that a song must be those things and barely breaks outside of them. And maybe you don't, in which case, great. But most people seem to do that. And again, I think that song structure exists for a reason. I'm not saying, oh, we should throw out tradition and throw out choruses. No, there's a reason those things exist. They're powerful. They're good. Most of our songs even maybe should follow some form of song structure that at least is not that wild and crazy outside of the norm. That being said, our song is taking people on a musical journey. And sometimes it might be best for the musical journey that we are taking the listener on for there to be a long outro that's pretty disconnected from the rest of the song. Not that it doesn't feel like it's a part of the song, just it's not just copying the chorus or the bridge or any other part of the song. And the same is true for an intro. And a great example of this is Fooling Yourself by Styx, which not only does it not take 30 seconds to get to the chorus, it takes 2 minutes. I think it's slightly south of 2 minutes, like 1 minute, 57 seconds to get to the chorus of the song. The first intro, and yes, I just said first intro, because really there's an intro that it has that's essentially an A-B-A structure into itself. Like literally there's an A-B-A, like an A section, a B section, and an A section again in the first intro of the song before we get to the intro that's just before the singing starts, which has a bunch of advantages. One of them is that allows you, for the radio version, you could cut out that first minute and a half or so, and then you still have an intro to the song that, you know, would be more radio friendly, where people have less of an attention span. But a better way, I think, to think through song structure is thinking about how the music can evolve over time to take somebody on an emotional journey with our music. And to me, an intro is a great way that we can do that, where we're not limited by, well, I don't really have any lyrics for this part. You know, the story doesn't need to be expanded at all. We can not expand on the story because the intro presumably has no lyrics, but still have an addition to the musical story, to the musical journey via an intro. So we're going to play the very long intro and sort of talk it through. So I already mentioned it follows an A-B-A structure where there's an A section, B section, and back to an A section, all before we get to essentially the second intro. So let's take a listen. This is the A section, of course. I would argue this is the second half of the A section, or the answer section, if you will. So we're still in this A section. Now we have a B section, significantly different from that A section. Still in that B section. And back to the A section. And this is still just the intro. Now it's winding down. This is what, a minute into the song already? Maybe a little over a minute. And now we have this second intro, which is really what's going to go straight into the rest of the song. Although, for the record, this still is not actually the music that we have in the first verse. It is different. Then we get into that first verse. So, something to consider whenever maybe, because a lot of people, the vast majority of people you talk to are going to give you that 30-second thing, and, oh, it's modern music, you got to do this, you got to do that, right? And those are the same people that will tell you things about, say, on YouTube or, you know, teaching things. Oh, you got to make it 30 seconds and snappy, and you got to jump cut every single thing. And, you know, nobody has an attention span for, you know, an hour-long video or podcast anymore. And those things are just not true, and there's always a reaction in the other direction. The biggest podcast on the planet is Joe Rogan, which averages like 3 hours each, right? And you might be a person, and I don't know, but like any given person listening to this might be a person that really is, if you can't give it to me in a 30-second short, I just can't do it, right? If so, you're in the wrong place, because this is a podcast. It's going to be like an hour. Unless you're watching the clip, which will be shorter, of course. But that's fine, right? Or maybe it's not, but that's a separate discussion. But for every one of those people, there are people that want the extra nuance and want the discussion that you get only from a free form discussion where you can go down rabbit holes and you can kind of, at the expense of possibly beating a dead horse, you can explain things from different angles so that, maybe one person was like, the first example didn't quite make sense to me. I kind of get it. Oh, but the second example, that brings things together for me. And if you just had one of those examples, I wouldn't have gotten it. Or, there's a certain phrase that you used eventually after sort of trying to figure out exactly what you're trying to say that finally was like, oh, that makes sense. Eureka, light bulb moment. So the same thing is going to be true for music, where, yes, are there people that get bored? I mean, there are people that like switch songs a minute and a half into a song because they're bored with the song. No matter how good the song is, they're just like, we listened to a minute and a half of the song. We're going to move to the next song because I'm impatient. Those people exist. Now, those people, I'm pro freedom, but boy, maybe jail. Maybe jail. It's like that meme from Parks and Rec. Well, it's not a meme. Yeah, scene from Parks and Rec where the guy from Venezuela or whatever is like, undercooked chicken, jail. Believe it or not, overcooked chicken, jail. Anyway, but something to consider whenever you hear this advice is there's always going to be a reaction the other way. There's always people that feel differently, which is why ultimately I think it's worth discussing, in the modern day. What are people looking for? Blah, blah, blah. There's some validity, right? I don't think people want us to go back to 60s recording quality. So it probably is important to actually record in a way that sounds good now. And if we just purposefully were like, I'm going to sound like an old Johnny Cash song, like, I don't know, that maybe people would reject. But even that, like, lo-fi exists. You know what I mean? So for all these rules that we can create, try to be unburdened by those. And instead obsess with what is right for my song. If what's right for your song is to have a longer intro that really kind of sets the stage musically for your song or just fits with your song beautifully and it makes your song 6 minutes long and you think, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And then just as a last thing, for something like this, for the song, I don't know if there's a radio edit for the song because it came out in 1977 and it's not something I looked into, but I presume the second intro that kind of really leads into the song, maybe when they played it on the radio, or maybe today when they play it on the radio, they cut out that first intro. That way, it's the best of all worlds. For the people who still want to listen to an album and experience a song as it was originally written in its full, beautiful sense, you can, listen to this, I believe, 5-minute song, give or take, with that long intro and everything, and it's great. And for all the people who are listening on the radio who aren't big Styx fans or wouldn't ever listen to a full album and they just kind of like give it to me now, you also have that version. Everybody wins. So something to consider for us all is maybe consider in our songs or in the next song, just write an intro that is its own thing. Yeah, it will probably be in the same key as the rest of your song, but otherwise it's its own entity because that's something that is so rarely done now. And it could be something that is right for your song. I know it's something I want to do. I've actually never done it before either. I'm talking about it because it was something that came up when I was thinking through this song and things to talk about. And I always get excited. Something I think that helps with songwriting is getting excited about, from every song, there's something that we can learn. Or there's something where it's like, ooh, I've never done something like that before. And in this case, maybe that takeaway is doing an intro that is its own song section, totally different from the rest of the song. Hey friend, if you found this helpful, then something else you'll likely find helpful is my free cheat sheet on 20 different ways to start writing a song. One of the easiest ways to avoid writer's block and make sure our songs don't all sound the same is just to change up how we start our song. So if you're ready to write your next great song, be sure to check it out at songwritertheory.com/free guide.